Okay, guys, so I'm going to give you a little bit of logistic how we're going to run it. So I'm going to ask everybody to stay muted unless you would like to speak. If you would like to speak, you have two options: either raise your hand or in the chat write me. The way I want to run this workshop is about conversations. Like the best way we can learn from one each other is to know what we are already working on and how we can get better in that kind of it. I do also want to mention that these conversations are uncomfortable, just like David mentioned, but they're needed. They're absolutely needed in the times that we're living, not only in our school district, but us as individuals. A lot of things that I had learned this year is why allies have felt that they don't have enough information to just hold out and say, no, that conversation is inappropriate. Like around friends or family, sometimes we have people making jokes about race and racism, but we don't have the tools to say, wait, that's not right. And sometimes we just stay shut, right? But we need to encourage people to have those conversations in a safe space. And also for our allies to understand that sometimes people of color want to have their own space because it's needed and it's necessary to have certain conversations. So I'm going to share with you guys my screen, and with this, my PowerPoint. So this this workshop is called How Creating Space to Talk About Race. And in the process that I was working on it, I said, what's the best way to allow people to have these conversations? It's not loading, but let me see if I can print. I'll just leave it this way. So the first thing that I would like for everybody to take 5 minutes is to click this Bitmoji, our second one. I am going to actually post the link in the chat. It's going to open a it's going to open a Jamboard, and in that Jamboard, I would like for you guys to think this way. What was the reason when you saw this creating change space to talk about race? What was the first thing to came to your mind? I'm going to put this in the chat, the link, so you guys can write, and I will give you 5 minutes to do that. Here we go. Can everybody see it in the chat?
No. But my chat is weird.
It's not there.
No, I don't have it either.
Okay, because, okay, I click it in another way. There you go. Hey, the technology.
It says I need access.
Okay. Let me.
And it's to the Google Slides.
Oh no, so it's not the Google slide. So let me give you the one I do need. Copy, now put here. Okay.
I just put the Jamboard in the chat.
Okay. So I'm actually gonna get into the Jamboard to our number 2. And then what came to your mind when you saw this workshop name, Creating Space to Talk About Race? And you can use anything. This is like little post sticky notes. Like if I want to write, I will write in the sticky note and it will come out. Or you can just write a test, whatever makes you easier for you guys. The question is, what came to your mind when you saw the name of the workshop, Creating Space to Talk About Race? Oh, there you go. So that's absolutely important. How do we create safe spaces in classroom to have these conversations with students? So our conversation today will give you tools to make that happen. ICS says, I want to be there so that they are people of color, specifically Black and brown folks, who can help guide allies and accomplices.
I'm sorry, Yahaira, it's Erin. I'm the computer illiterate person. Am I just supposed to be typing? Is it going to show up, or what do we do?
Yeah, you should either write it in a sticky note, which is the top over here.
Okay.
Here, you will see the sticky note, and then we'll discuss it as a group.
Thank you.
You got it. Okay, so I'm just gonna give you guys a couple of minutes. At 9:20, we'll just start.
Oh, and remember, when you write your sticky note, you have to actually move it so that it's not on top of, because they go to the same exact spot. So if you once you write it and you notice it might be over someone else's, just move it.
It's the same thing. You can use any page. So either page 1 or page 2, whatever. I just wanted to make sure you guys have the space to write it. I want my BPOC students to feel safe and supported when these conversations need to be had in the classroom. I see people, they learn how to move it. Good job, Jennifer. Okay, so the question again is, when you saw the name of this workshop, what came into your mind? What came to your mind? Creating space to talk about race. And don't apologize. I'm okay with repeating. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm gonna give you 4 more minutes. I can ask you guys to mute yourself. There's a lot of background noise. What came to my mind where Yahaira is leading it? You guys are too funny. How to organically and steadily bring up the topic of race, the student will feel supported and challenged. Taking about race. This is amazing.
I don't see mine there.
Oh, maybe you, let me see if it's in the 3rd page. Did you click done?
Do you see it now?
What did you say, hun?
I said, good morning. I want to have the freedom and the safety to speak openly and honestly.
Maybe it's on top of somebody's else. I don't.
It's on the 1st page.
Oh, it's in the 1st page.
Oh.
They are. Yay.
Thank you, dear.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Hi, Joel.
Awesome. Yeah, we're here. This is great. Curiosity. Okay, I have it here, Val. I see it. Safe space to discuss and share strategies. Hoping to improve my toolbox and hear what others doing on their logos. So that is great. So that's a lot of the things that we're going to be having conversations. Who is doing this work already and how is being received by others in your district? So ask, learn what their experience, find the often more knowledge of that. Yeah. You know what's interesting is like we don't give so much credit to our students, and our students do want to have these conversations. They're curious, and that's why we need to create these spaces for them to feel comfortable having these conversations. So let me see what this one says. Wanting to be able to make time in my classes for my students to talk about what is important to them with respect to race and current environment and events. So who would like to explain to the group what they wrote in our Jamboard? Does anybody want to expand a little bit more on what they wrote in our Jamboard?
You know, I'll always go first.
Oh,
I said that I wanted to be here because I wanted to make sure that people of color were here, particularly Black and Brown folks. I think there's a lot of stuff going on right now with the attacks against Asian folks and historically Black and Brown folks, Indigenous. And I think that it's important to help accomplices and allies help them to guide the conversations. Because if you leave it in the hands of all white folks, we already know what happens. We've seen it, right? So language really matters. And so, you know, one of the things that I was talking about in another setting was when discussing what's happening to folks of color, one of the things that we have in common as BIPOC, whether we're Asian, Pan-Asian, Black, Brown, whatever, is that this all stems from white supremacy and white supremacist ideas. And that's what this nation was founded on, right? Is white supremacist ideas. So it's not so much like stop Asian hate and stop and like Black Lives Matter, which are all great and wonderful. But I feel like the root of it, no one gets to the root. They keep putting Band-Aids on little things and trying to do that instead of going to the root of the cause and saying, this is what the cause is. This is all happening because of these white supremacist notions and the uplifting of white supremacist laws and things like that. And it's not just white people who uphold white supremacy. So just being here and helping people frame the context in which you would have those conversations with your colleagues and with students. That's all.
Thank you, Jennifer. Valerie? You're muted, Valerie.
Well, thank you. I forget that all the time. The reason I am so excited about participating in this diverse group of educators is that I agree with the young lady who spoke before me that the real issue here is systematic racism. And the perpetrators of this racism were wealthy white men years ago who decided that there needed to be otherisms in our country. And part of having the freedom and the safety, as I said on my post-it, to speak openly and honestly with respect and acknowledgement of feelings. My granddaughter told me when we were discussing this, she marched in the Black Lives Matter in Atlanta. I was very angry with my son, even though I probably would have done the same thing with him at 9 years old. But she said, Grandma, white is a color too. And there is a white race. And there are people who identify as white who, when I spoke to a woman whose ancestors came on the Mayflower, she indicated that everyone who came into this country across the ocean were never white people, but became white people when the white people's race had to be expanded because of all of the interracial activities that were going on with the Native Americans and other people of color who came into this country. So recognizing that white is a race, poor white people suffer the same as Black people, except that Oprah, who's one of the wealthiest women in the world, faces discriminations that poor white people don't have to face. So we have to recognize that the systems need to be drastically changed. And instead of trying to change white people and Black people and other people's ideologies, which are difficult to change, we need to change the system. The United States government, with the presidency, the Congress, and the Supreme Court, these people in our country and here in Massachusetts, redlining, gerrymandering, healthcare, racism exists because the people in power in our government choose to allow it to continue. So I agree with the young lady who spoke before me. It's a bigger issue, and it's not calling out people, it's calling in people. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I have one more. Can you help me say your name, Maritha? Did I say it right?
You got it. You got it. Yay. I came because I'm working. I wrote the Black History Month curriculum at our school for the last 2 years, and one of the things that I have found is that the many colleagues don't like to talk about it, and they don't racism, and they don't know how. And one of the things that I think is important is that as we walk through this stuff that's going on in the world, is that we figure out how to work on ourselves. At least for me, I admit that as non-prejudiced as I would like to be, I still have prejudices, and I have to deal with them, and I have to do the work around dealing with them. You know, standing out in Northampton, I was one of the 2 Black people that stood at the Stop Asian Hate rally, and I was kind of disgusted with my own people. But as I work through the what about, why didn't they show up for, that's my work to do. And I think that I have to do the right thing for the right reason and wait for that change to come, but still walking and doing the things that I know that I have to do continuously. Otherwise, nothing will change. And I'm saying openly that I struggle with it. And so that's my work to do, but I still have to be uncomfortable and make that change in myself. And so I hope to model that for my white colleagues, that it's okay to be uncomfortable.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's one of the things that I had mentioned. Every time I do either a book discussion, we did White Fragility, and we started with a lot of people, and then people started leaving the book discussion. And other was like, oh my God, they're not gonna, like, we're not gonna have it. You know what? They were not ready to have that conversation at that time. And it's okay. And we need to learn how to be okay with people not being ready. But if you stay there, that's important. It's not the people who leave, but it's the people who stay and say, it hurts, it bothers me, but I'm going to continue because it's the right thing. As educators, we have students of each color, shape, and form. And we need to make sure that our kids are coming not only for an education, but in a place that they feel safe, that they can talk to their educators and say, wait, I don't understand that. Wait, why the color of my skin is an issue? We need to look for tools, because this is an issue that is coming from kindergarten. And these, how do we explain kindergartens that their beautiful skin is going to be, it is an issue in the times that we're living. They see it as something bad, as something wrong. And that's why we have to have these conversations with one each other and see what are we doing and what can we do to get better and creating those spaces. So I'm actually going to go over here, and this is what we will be discussing today, is like, ask yourself, why do we have to create these spaces to talk about race? How do we create those safe spaces? And who can support us? What kind of support system are we going to need to have these conversations. So those are the things that we're going to be discussing in today's workshop. So let's start with the why. Why talking about race is not easy or comfortable, but it's absolutely needed. And I have a video that I would like to share with you guys.
The book is called So You Want to Talk About Race. And so my question is, do people want to talk about race? I mean, who are these people?
Yahaira, did you check the box for sharing computer sound?
Say that again.
We're not hearing it, so maybe if you want to stop the video and like unshare, and then when you go back and click the box that says share computer audio.
Okay, so I stopped sharing.
Okay, so you go to share, and then before you like actually share, there's a little box that says share computer audio. You want to make sure that that and the video box are checked.
Share the video. Now I got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wouldn't do this without Sarah, so thank you, Sarah.
So you want to talk about race, and so my question is: do people want to talk about race? I mean, who are these people?
Yeah. You know what's interesting, what I found, and at first I really did not want to write this book. I talk about race all the time. I think there's this weird myth that Black people love talking about race. We don't. I don't know any Black people who do. For most Black people, it's a very painful, risky endeavor. But when my agent had asked, what about, you're writing these essays, what about these conversations, helping facilitate these conversations? And my response was, I am not the white people whisperer. I'm not doing that.
The white people whisperer. Okay.
But what happened when I started paying attention to what I was getting, and what I noticed was I was getting a lot of people messaging me privately, and people would even make fake email accounts to email me and go, everyone's talking about cultural appropriation, but I don't know what that is. And it wasn't just white people, right? I think, it is a tool of the oppressor to deny us language for these things to even begin to move forward. And so I started paying attention not to necessarily what people are shouting online, right? But what people wanted to say, but couldn't, because they didn't necessarily have that tool set handy. And things get murky really quickly, but people keep trying. We are talking about it, right? Over and over again, which means some part of us at least recognizes the necessity about it. So, my goal was really to say, hey, okay, you know what? We absolutely do need to talk about this. We can't avoid it. Here's a little primer that might make it a little bit easier.
Okay. So I like how she said that people of color don't like to talk about race or racism. It's true. We don't like, because it just make us uncomfortable too. Like, people think that it's easy for us to have these conversations, but they're not. They bring a lot of baggage, a lot of pain for a lot of people. I'm Puerto Rican, and I came from the island 10 years ago to Massachusetts, and I never understood racism until I came here. In Puerto Rico, we're all shapes. We can be super, super white shade. We can be super, super dark, or we can be tan. And I never understood. I never saw a difference. So I never told my kids that the color of their skin was going to be an issue coming to the United States. So we come here, and all these things, and people treat you different when they see the color of your skin. I needed to explain to my kids, when they were going to start driving, that you had to be very cautious. I tried to explain to my kids' friends when they would go to go hike, and they were going to just shoot a BB gun. And I'm like, no, you can't do it. And my child couldn't understand it, right? And I was being that overprotective mother. And then I had to sit down with my child and say, baby, this is going to be an issue. Your friends are not going to be shot if they see them with something. It's something that, unfortunately, I needed to sit down with my child and explain to them. And until today, he's 17 years old, and he doesn't get it. Because for my kid, his skin is not an issue. But we are living in times where it is. And how many times you had like open the computer or social media or anything and you see that a white kid shoots somebody and they're treated like a human, and a black kid with candy was shot because they were suspicious. Like these are things that our students are seeing, our children's, our families, but we haven't figured out how to have those conversations. Thank you, Valerie. So why we have to have these conversations? We have to have them because our students feel that they're not protected. A lot of our students also look at us and say, what are you doing for me? How do I feel comfortable in your classroom if we can't have these conversations? So any questions, any comments so far? I want to hear from all of you guys.
It's Erin. Can I just make a comment? Obviously coming from a 50-year-old white lady, my district is not all that diverse. When my kids, I have 4 children, 2 by birth, 2 adopted. So my daughters are both Filipino. So when they were in our school system, they happened to be the only Filipinos at the time in their classes, in their grade. And everyone was like, and I was just as guilty because I look at my family and I see my family. I don't look at my family and see my boys one color, my daughter's another color. I don't see it. Their teachers didn't see it till my daughter was in 2nd grade. She brought it to my attention that she saw it. And that's something that we forget, is that like, and teachers and educators, we all like, we're in education because we love people. I mean, we're not doing this for the money, obviously, especially as parents. We're doing it because we're there for the kids. But I think we have to put ourselves in their spot sometimes, and we're doing it because we're well-intentioned. We don't want to see their skin color because we don't want them to be different. They are different, and we have to acknowledge that. And I think that's kind of, and it's interesting just hearing you say that, like, you didn't even see it in your own son till you have to look at it from how other people are seeing your own son. And so it's eye-opening, and it's whether like I'm just naive and just what, you know, so it's something that we all need to learn. So I appreciate you doing this. So thank you.
Thank you, Erin. I have 2 hands. I have Jennifer and Valerie.
I'm going to acquiesce to Jennifer.
So I love what Erin just said, because it is exactly why I am an educator in a majority white district, because I grew up in a district that was majority white, and my family came from Jamaica. So while it's not racism, there is colorism. People with lighter skin are treated differently than people with darker skin. But I didn't know about, you know, and if you've watched this amazing series that they've just been putting on, I think CBS is something of a nation, Soul of a Nation. Phenomenal. It's a must watch. One of the questions they ask at the end is, when is the first time you knew you were Black? And for many of the people that I know, it is always between pre-K and 1st grade, because someone else pointed it out. So it is really important that not only do you see students that are different culturally, racially, that you try to learn as much as you can to show them how interested you are in them, right? You don't necessarily need to point them out. You know, I had a 3rd grade teacher who hated me. She was so racist, and I knew it when I was in 3rd grade. She and she would call on me for specific. It was awful. Anyway, and I also want to say, just again, language. I'm a word nerd. I'm always going to harp on these things. When you're talking to students, it's not their color, it's not their race that's a problem. It is the ignorance of other people and their hatred for others. It has nothing to do with the color of my skin, that child's color of skin, their race. It's because of racist attitudes and supremacist attitudes. It's not because I was very quick to internalize everything. So if people said to me, you know, it's not, I mean, a little girl said to me, it's okay, I'll still be your friend even though you're Black. And that was the first time I knew. And I was in kindergarten. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. You know, in my little 4-year-old mind, I was younger than all the other kids. So yeah, I just, you know, language really, really matters. And yeah, I'm always gonna harp on the language part, sorry.
Thank you, Jennifer. And before I go to Valerie, I want you also to remind even little things as not pronouncing your student's name right. Little things like that. If his name is Josue in Spanish, don't call him Joshua. His name is Josue. It is important.
And ask and listen before you try, if you don't know it.
Or ask them by saying it right? Because you want to, your name is part of your identity. The name of our students is part of their identity. One thing that I fought emails with my district, they put me Yahaira. And they're like, oh, it doesn't look like my name because it says Yahaira, my name is Yahaira. And I email until they change it, because you are not going to tell me my name is too difficult for you. Yahaira, it's my name, we'll figure it out, and that's who I am. Our students, their name are important. So that is one of the things that you can create a bond with your students, making sure you are pronouncing their name right. Simple little things.
And to practice that, you can correct people when they say Yahaira instead of Yahaira, because people do it all the time in every meeting we're in, and I always correct them. You know, not publicly, but like, I'm like, and I've asked Yahaira, I'm like, it is Yahaira, right? Like, am I saying it wrong? Because
yeah,
I've heard
right.
so many people not call her by her name. So a great way to practice that is with adults.
Yes. Okay, I have Valerie, and then
Yes.
Somebody Congress School. I'm not quite sure. I know her name, but I forgot. Okay, so Valerie, and then
okay. All right, thank you. And I'm glad you brought that up, Yahaira, because teachers, other teachers also suffer from a lack of respect when it comes to names. And we had a Korean woman, and it was very difficult to pronounce her name, but we had to practice. And I had to have a class with teachers practicing the names. We had a little boy from Africa named Sineju, and they called him Juju. I didn't like that. And we had a boy who was named Ansel, and they pronounced it from Hansel and Gretel. So, you know, this disrespect of names is not just with children, but it's with staff as well. But the other thing, as far as this question is concerned, I have always had questions about race, because when I was 6 years old, a 3-year-old asked her father if I was a nigger. And my parents moved to Alston, Brighton, and suffered great indignities by being one of very few Black families that owned a home there. And when the little girl called me that, I had to go home and ask my mother, because my sisters and I had 4, were never exposed to racism because we didn't go out. We just played around our home. I didn't encounter racism until I went to the Boston Public Schools, where principals referred to my sisters and I as monkeys. Because the 4 of us went to school together, they referred to us as a gang. These were my sisters. So the racism that I experienced was in education, from my teachers and not from my classmates. The jokes were from my classmates. We're studying Africa, and Valerie is that guy with the bone in their nose, your father. These kinds of things that occurred in the classroom. The teacher who told me to spell witch, and when I spelled it W-I-T-C-H, she said, no, it's W-H-I-C-H. So she would flip it so that I wouldn't be successful in the spelling contest. So racism for me was not something I experienced it didn't hurt me until that little girl called me the name, and until I started Boston Public Schools. And so I have always wanted to talk about race. There were 2 groups that didn't. My parents didn't want to talk about race because they didn't emigrate. There was no emigration to the North. They call it the Great Migration. It was the Great Escape. I mean, come on. My parents were escaping lynchings and murders and jailings and rapings. Get the story straight. So I've always wanted to talk about race, but white people never wanted to talk about race with me. Because it has been and continues to be a divisive topic. I am just so glad that nowadays that the generation that has come after me is so willing to have these dialogues and these courageous conversations, because racism infects all of us, especially white people, because they don't understand that in their history, racism affected them too. The Irish need not apply signs. No dogs, no Jews, no Black people. The Polish, all of these races who came here, who can pass as white people, who now have the privilege. However, they brought my people here because we couldn't pass, we couldn't hide. So racism has always been important to me. And I think our children, my granddaughter's 9, and she's already discussing race. White is a color, she tells grandma. Grandma, white is a color. And race is defined as, in the child's mind, as an educator, they look at race as, oh, why are you this way? Why are you different? They don't see it as a negativity until the adult ideology and teachers in the classroom make a distinction that dehumanizes and devalues children in the classroom. So teachers need to educate themselves, all of us, on how to approach race, not racism, that's different, how to approach race in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I also want to make sure that we use our more inclusive educators. Thank you, Valerie. She knew where I was coming. Okay, I have Cambridge School. I know your name, but that's what I see.
Oh, I don't know why it just only says Cambridge School. Yahaira, it's Emma. You know, we know.
Hey, Emma, how are you?
Good. Fortunately for me, when I was in Boston Public Schools for the first 3 years, I had 3 Black teachers, female Black teachers, the first time and only time until I went to college. And then the one time we had a white substitute, I remember if the kids were talking, she squeezed your cheek so hard that you would cry. Like, I still remember it till this day. I was in first grade, and I don't know, back then, I guess they got away with a lot of stuff. But for me, it's like, okay, my name is Emma Gardner. And sometimes I go on job interviews, people are surprised to see my very Black face. and they're like, they look at me, they look at my resume, they look at me, they look at my resume, I'm like, and they're like, okay, and it's obvious. And then another thing with names, just to add real quick, is that I think Gardner is a popular no-brainer name, but people will always say Gardenier. And I'm like, how do you get Gardenier? Like, this is no, new connotation of Gardner, is Gardner. But anyway, I think just for the main question you asked about why, we need to talk about race with children, is because from my memory, the first time I had to check off a box to say what race I was in first grade. So I think that's why I feel like schools, unfortunately, play too much of a detrimental part in introducing race to students. Because it's like, okay, I'm on a bus, I'm waiting for the bus with my white friend, Melissa Graham, my Asian friend, Jennifer Young, and we're cool. But then we get into school and you give us even MCAS, it wasn't MCAS back then, but it was some kind of standardized test. And it's like, check off your race. Like, what? So right then and there, I feel like schools are the reasons why, I guess we have to identify, and that's when the separation begins.
I agree 100% with you, Emma. And one of the things that I mentioned was like, if race was not that important, why is everywhere? You had to identify yourself, right? And people are scared to identify. Our students are scared to identify themselves because as soon they identify them as Black, they know that there's a lot of things that are going to change for them. Either they like it or understand it or accept it. My daughter, my youngest daughter, she looks white. She used to super white with blonde hair and everything. And her struggle was like, people couldn't believe that she was Puerto Rican. She will identify herself and people are like, oh, is your dad white? Is your man white? She's like, no, they're full Puerto Rican. Oh, you don't look Puerto Rican. What the heck that even means? Like little things like this that we say it without even consciously, right? Oh, you don't look Hispanic. that is hurtful for a child because you are questioning their identity. So little things like that can affect the beginning of that relationship with that child. Camila?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. I'm just really thinking about everything that people before me have contributed, and these points about language, and Jennifer phrased it so beautifully. Language matters so much, and I think language also shows that kind of direction of looking, right? So with the language has the power to name a problem and sometimes to put it in the wrong direction, right? So the problem is racism. It's not diversity. It's when we fail to acknowledge diversity as collective wisdom that we can learn from, when we fail to bring in, our students as, when we treat them as blank slates rather than everyone who is in our classroom brings in valuable experience and perspective, and from what they bring, they can grow from that. We can all grow from that. I think that's where when we're in a really bad place, and when these, these really devastating experiences in the classroom, these experiences of being suddenly realizing that, I am at the mercy of these forces that are against me. Those are experiences of silencing. So I think, education can be powerful and positive when we really think about how can I make my students not only safe but also present in their education, what I want to learn from them. And I think for me, and I teach at Roxbury Community College, for me that the most valuable experiences is when I really think about how can I shape our conversation in the classroom so that students give me tips as to how they would want me, let's say, to moderate discussions, but to put discussion in their hands. And especially when it comes to conversations about race, I would hate a situation, where the dynamic, and I already, as a teacher have sort of, I'm the boss of the classroom in a way by default. But the situation where I would be talking at people about their experiences that they actually understand better than I do, because they have that, that experience of it, and frankly, very often a much deeper understanding of the power dynamics at play. So I feel like whenever we can genuinely show students that we value who they are, that's when we're winning. That's when real education, real learning is happening. So I'm really excited to learn more from you all. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna go to Maritha, and then I'm going to continue with our PowerPoint.
Yeah, I run Students of Color and Alliance at our school, and on January 6th, I watched with my students the insurrection of the Capitol building, and it was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, because I'm younger, and I mean, I can watch through history and see the racism and have felt it definitely innumerable times, but not like what we saw on January 6th. And what we were told was we were supposed to the next day read a script that was ridiculously dumb, excuse me, and not really talk about what happened and why it happened with our students, because it might make some students feel uncomfortable while watching this. And I was very clear. I was like, I don't care, because this is something that regardless is going to affect everyone across the board, no matter who you are. And so, but again, it goes back to people don't know how to have these uncomfortable conversations. And let me tell you, I visited several classrooms and the teachers were like, well, yeah, it was really bad. And I was like, no, well, let me help you understand. This was terrorism. Let's call it what it is. Let's just, deal with real stuff, not pretending and, oh, they're not so bad, or, they didn't know what was going. Of course they knew. So while watching that with my SOCA kids after school, they all were in tears. But what happened was they were able to be in a safe place where their feelings would be validated, where they could say, Miss Wallace, this is really screwed up. And I was like, I don't care if you swear, nothing is going to go beyond me. I understand why you're feeling the way you do. And even and other things that when we get a script, we're supposed to follow this. And I'm like, this is bull. Have you talked to any people of color when you put this thing together? Because, well, we have places for you to go feel safe. Call this person. Kids are not going to call a person they don't have a connection with. They're going to reach out and find someone that they do. And when we as educators, we need to be ready, not to be like, well, I'm sorry, that's so difficult. We're not going to discuss that right now. And so as this happens, we need to educate ourselves. I cannot tell you how much history I've learned by picking up a book about my own history. So, and it's hard and it takes time, but at the same time, we need this because I'm really tired of white supremacy teaching. It's driving me nuts.
Thank you, Joe. Do you have your hand up because it came up and down? Yes. Okay, I'm gonna go to Joe and then we're gonna continue the PowerPoint.
Hello, everybody. Let me just change my view, I get. I so appreciate, Yahaira, you having this and everybody. I put my sticky to ask students to ask them what their experiences are. And I found in the last year particularly, and I teach college students, that they are so far ahead of me in their knowledge. And as we know with the June Uprising, it was led by high school and junior high school students in many communities, in Springfield and Worcester. I mean, reports that I've had in terms of who has been Amherst, in Holyoke, it was high school and junior high school students that were leading the protests. And that's profound. And, you know, we're working with young people who I've got college students in their 20s who, since Occupy was September 2011, so they've grown up since they were 10 years old, connected to devices where all these messages are being communicated, and their language, at least by the college level, the young people that I'm with, is so sophisticated. They have, the ones that are in my classes at least, so it's a self-selected cohort, have, I need to turn to them to ask them, what do they think? What are their knowledges? And they can educate me. So, and just to connect that, Ibram Kendi's, what he's brought us in terms of that idea that there's no neutrality. You're either anti-racist or you're racist. Like, you can't just sit on the sidelines. And so what that's making me think, and I haven't done this yet, I haven't figured out how to do this really, but that this notion of systemic racism that we in the task force talk about through our workshop, in part, the mapping racism, and this idea that you can't separate individual from systemic and cultural. They're all interconnected. So in having this conversation, I think to also connect it to activism somehow, like, it's not just about talking about it, but it's about what are the structural systemic conditions that separate us. So for white privileged students, what does that look like in terms of where you, because a lot of white privileged students, actually because of segregation, do not have real connections with students of color, with BIPOC students. It just doesn't happen. Those are the walls of redlining, what that's done. So and like I say, I haven't figured this out, but like, I'm beginning to think, how do we think about our classrooms, our relations with students, as we're organizing together? And I'm just thinking about MCAST and like how we are all enforcers of that racist regime. We all have to kind of sit there, witness it. And so how we connect talking about racism to also taking action, to organizing. So that's just a question that I'm trying to figure out how to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. And that's a great question. It's like, how, let's listen to our students. Our students have so many stories that and they're willing to share it, but we need to create those spaces. And that's how I'm going to go to our how are we going to create those spaces? So create a welcoming classroom and school. This came from NEA, and it's creating, I had to move my, creating a welcoming classroom and school. What things you can do to do that? So create a welcoming school and classroom. How do we do that? First of all, another thing, that little things like this, like encourage your students to speak their first language, even if you don't understand it. Our kids like to use their first language. It's part of who they are. It's their identity. If I can speak Spanish all day, I will speak Spanish all day because it's how I feel comfortable. As a Hispanic Puerto Rican woman, I like my Spanish. It makes me feel good. Encourage your students to speak their language. Sit down with them. Learn a little bit. Make your classroom also welcoming. Like, not only have things start speaking in English, but the first day, figure out how many language there's in school. Put them in a board. I create another professional development that I did. It was like understanding the bilingual brain and games that you can do to help people. Buy a Jenga, a very Jenga, and then put things in English, put things in Spanish, put things in different way. And every time a kid gets out of the Jenga, they will learn English, they will learn Spanish, and people other languages. Like, you can actually create a space where everybody feel comfortable in their own skin. And look for those game music. Music can connect you with your students. I know that a lot of us, when we listen to our, like, the music today is kind of out there, a little crazy and a little inappropriate, but these kids are, this is what they're listening to. And there's a lot of cultural in those music. The Hispanic code, like, as soon as I hear one of my songs, my body start moving. It's just like my thing start, my head start bubbling. Like, I connect to that song. Do that to your students and ask them, why do you connect with this music? What do you like about the lyric? How does lyric makes you feel? Because we judge a lot our students by the music they listen without knowing why or what kind of feeling they get from it. So it says that new research is beginning to find that, I'm going to change the word teacher, educators empathize can be a key factor in student success and the reduction of the disciplinary actions. Having, everybody knows that in most of the schools, at least in my district, my students of color are getting more disciplined than my white students. It's fact, there's numbers about it. Why? And we start asking why. First of all, one of the things that little things like this, right? You are talking to a child and the child is looking down. And the parent and the teacher or educator is like, you need to look to me in the eyes. Why? You don't know if that is out of respect. There's a lot of cultural ignorance that we have that can affect the relationship that we build with our students. If in the Hispanic culture, my children do not look at my eyes when I'm telling them they're doing something wrong. Out of respect, they put their head down. Educators don't get this. And this can affect the relationship that you're trying to build with that student to make them feel safe in your classroom. Create a supportive cultural and hold affirming space for all of your students, individually and collectively. Use a diverse curriculum. One of the things that also had affect our children when it comes to race and racism, there's not books in our classroom that look like us. I have not had educators, like, a lot of our students go to me because they feel connected, because I'm Hispanic, because I look like them. And that's why we had to create those spaces and said, I don't look like you, but I want to know you. I want to know what am I doing? The most beautiful thing is, as an educator, as a grown adult, is go to a child and teach me, educate me. And they're going to say, wait, an adult is telling me, and they're going to be able to have those conversations with you. And it's okay that you, like, how beautiful it is that you get educated by your student. I get educated by my student constantly in special ed. And I never thought how smart they were because other people said, well, they don't do this, they don't do that. And I sat down with them, I was like, what would you like to do? How would you like to learn your ABCs? Our students are so capable, but we need to create that space and that bond and be humble. We can be humble to our students. I don't know what it to feel to be an Hispanic woman or a Black man, but if you explain to me, I'm more than happy to learn. And I think that that could start creating that kind of bond and allowing our students to feel comfortable around you. Okay. Oh, check your own biases. We all have them. And that does not make you a bad person, by the way. A lot of people say, if I start getting a book discussion about race, I'm telling you that I'm a bad person, I'm a racist, and I need to admit that. And people get like, no, it means that you understand that there's other race out there, and that you understand that you have certain privilege, and that you understand that that privilege can either help your student or harm your students if you don't know what's going on. Okay, so that was our first one. Any questions? Anybody is doing this and at your local right now? I'm gonna stop sharing. Oh, well, the other one is about biases and barriers. We do that a lot. We create barriers in our classroom without even knowing. Encourage, this is one of my favorites, encourage self-expression. And how can you do that? So I don't know if you guys were participate. In summer, I did another professional development, and it was poetry, spoken words. You can encourage our students to use music, to use painting, to use poetry. These are all these tools our students should have to be able to express themselves when it comes to races, races, and whatever you guys want to use, right? One day it doesn't have to, it can be part of the curriculum. Like get a, look for somebody that it doesn't have to be Rosa Parks or anybody like, but today, let's talk about LeBron James and allow your students to talk about the things that he done for education for others. Let's talk about Beyonce, Jay-Z. These are people that they connect with. If you don't know other rappers, Little Baby talk about did a video about race. Joyner Lucas has a lot of videos that has to do with one of the it's a very like hard song, but for you to get it, it called "I'm Not a Racist," and it's a discussion between a white male and a man of color, and they're bickering back and forth, trying to make understand the other person what they go through. Like there's if these kids know about these rappers, they can tell you how this music made them feel. Write poetry, express yourself. We need to give tools to our students to express their anger, to express their frustration, to express their pain. A lot of our students have pain. There's a lot of things that come culturally too. Like me, being a Puerto Rican woman, my grandmother reminded me that my place is the home, right? I need to learn how to cook, how to clean, and I should not be questioning everything. What my grandmother didn't know that I was not built that way, and I will question and ask everything. And I got my fair in trouble, but it made me who I am today. And I had given that to my students and my kids to be able to express themselves. And we can agree and disagree, but we do need to create those spaces for our kids. Our kids are aching to have these conversations, especially after the riot, especially after all this year with COVID. COVID had affected our communities of color more than the other communities. Okay. Valerie, I love it. She's working on her moving back. but I would like to ask to any educator here, what are you using, or are you working on anything right now? Are any of these things that I have said resonates with you and your classroom? Valerie, yes.
Okay, my participation with the educators in the classroom is with them on Zoom. We've put together conversations about race with parents, and particularly parents who do not have biracial children, because usually parents with biracial children automatically join this kind of forum. So that's my way to assist with educators in the classroom in developing conversations about race. I taught in Cambridge, which is a very diverse neighborhood, but also has a lot of racism that they're just recognizing or have been hidden. But when I taught in Mattapan, we had an ESP, and when he decorated the stage for Charlotte's Web, he painted Charlotte with braids. And he made Charlotte a person of color. And I don't know if I'm sure many of you educators are familiar with the Charlotte Web story with the pig and the spider and all that. But the majority of the children at the Mildred Avenue School were people of color. And no one told him to do that. No one asked him to do that. And that's why when Yahaira is asking us to refer to all people who participate in the education of our children, teachers, paras, custodians, lunch mothers, on and on and on. This man took it upon himself to recognize the diversity that existed in our school and the majority of the children that are represented. And he made Charlotte look like the children in the classroom. The concern that I have, another way to, so when you're doing your school plays and when you're playing your music, I used to get the hip hop, bip bop music that I don't really understand. I'm more Anita Hill, not Anita Hill, but some of the rhythm and blues. And what I would do is I would buy the clean version of their profane music. And I would play the clean version, which omitted the F words and the sexual references. But so I'm bopping and weaving to Yahaira, but I'm respecting the fact that I don't want profanity in my classroom. I'm old school, but I recognize that the children want to hear that music. So that was how I adapted my classroom when we played our music. Another thing that I did was I bought textbooks. The school wouldn't buy them. And in Boston, the salary is a little different. You get combat pay. So the salary in Boston starts at about 70. And you climb very rapidly. So I bought textbooks in Spanish. And now I can say that I wasn't supposed to because they can't fire me. But we were forbidden to use textbooks in Spanish because of Usta, whatever his name is. But when I bought those textbooks in Spanish, they were the exact same as my textbooks in English. So the children could cross. Then the last thing I did was I had Spanish for a day. And in our class, you could not speak English, no one. And I had a senior student play the teacher role, and for 45 minutes. And then the last 15 minutes of class, we talked about how did you feel? The white kids and the black kids who didn't speak Spanish felt stupid, isolated, disrespected, mistreated, and ignored because we didn't speak English. So then we flipped that. And then I asked the Spanish children and they said, now you know how we feel. So I think it's important for us. A man will never know what it's like to give birth. No matter how much I explain that to a man, he will never know. And I'm not talking about the pain. I'm talking about grabbing the baby's foot in your belly and hearing the kicking that goes on in the movement. And I will never know how it feels to get hit below the waist. So we can empathize, but we cannot feel the sadness and the harm that children experience from their teachers, because we as teachers are idolized, are treated godlike. And in some cases of the parents and the guardians and many of our students cannot model that at home, their situation is very difficult. So when a teacher is making fun of a student's name, or when a teacher is saying, oh, Valerie, you'll like chicken because you people eat watermelon and chicken a lot, or having rice and beans for our Spanish cultural activity, because that's all Spanish people eat. We need to recognize that as teachers, we inadvertently use our implicit biases to harm children, and the children will not let you know. So you need to educate yourselves. Find out that red is not a color that is used in the Asian community. It's disrespectful. That I learned that the hard way. So we need to learn the cultural norms, because in my community, we were told, look me in the eye. So when I went to school, I was telling Spanish kids, look me in the eye, and yelling, and not yelling at them, but admonishing them when they didn't, because no one told me that was a cultural norm. So educators need to find a way. I don't know how that's done, but maybe some of you can write an educational cultural norm textbook for teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, so Emma, can you explain a little bit about this in the chat, and then we'll continue?
So yeah, I just recently learned about this social justice standards, and it just makes you how, I guess it's help to the how to, because sometimes we don't know how to do it. And if you just go through this in the frameworks, and it makes a huge, huge, huge difference. That's all.
Thank you, Emma. So continuing the how, and how do we create these spaces? So we encourage self-expression, like I mentioned, either to poetry, pictures, music. Be open yourself. Like, be okay with feeling uncomfortable and telling the students, like, oh, that's interesting. Like, create, engage, don't avoid. I know this is difficult, because sometimes when things get uncomfortable, we are normally built to the way that I'm going to move this way because it's too hard for me to discuss. But kids are looking to our body language too when we're talking about race, and they want to know if you're interested in them and their race and what they're going to. So try to not avoid, but engage in those conversations. Create opportunities for discussion. This can happen at any time. So I do want to mention, I put a link for each one of them, which NEA have, and it will give you more extended things like what are they talking about. So use current events, cultural happenings, and locals angles to spark a relevant and meaningful discussion. So you can ask your students, if any of you guys have been in the Black Lives Matters rally, it happened around everywhere. If any of them went there, why would you go there? Like, and you're scared that because of you, we can start conversations so simple like that. Encourage those conversations in your classroom. Ask them about what's going on at home. How's your mom feeling about this? How's your parents? Like, anybody. Be proactive by creating planned opportunities for students to share their stories and life experiences in ways that connect to your curriculum. So if you're, for example, you can be talking about, like I'm doing in social studies, I'm talking about people in our community, heroes in our community, right? And when we talk about police, the kids don't see police as our heroes in our community. So we need to be more specific about what's the difference between polices in general and police brutality. We need to be very cautious how we divide those two conversations. I had a conversation with somebody that mentioned, like, I said, I didn't like how you framed that they're mutually exclusive, the Black Lives Matter movement and the police. I think that you're pointing them against each other. And the discussion that have been over the years is not about police in general, but it's about police brutality and the things that they do that they get away with. So we need to be very cautious the difference between police and police brutality. What is the Black Lives Matter movement? Why we don't say all lives matters, right? Why there's so many conversations that we can have with our students, with our young ones. Tell them to write letters about, today I'm happy because of this. Or what made you sad when you see this picture? Show a picture of the riot or anything. Like, we can have these conversations with our students if we create those spaces for them to feel not judgy. And then again, our faces can say a lot. You know, we need to be very cautious how we react to what our students are living or sharing with us. Discussion about race are often reactive. Once blatant racism has occurred and often not very constructive, with lots of blaming and shaming. Let's stop the blaming and shaming. We should not be making other people feel uncomfortable. The conversation is going to be uncomfortable, but we need to be, like Jennifer said, words matters. And we need to be very careful how we express it. Talk about racism and racial equity. How do we talk about that? Again, this is all an NEA page. Racial equity is not just the absence of discrimination, but also the presence of value and systems that ensure fairness and justice. So, I'm sorry, it's this chat comes out in and out. Okay, so what does racial equity mean? So racial equity or racial justice is the systematic fair treatment of all people, resuming in fair opportunities and outcomes as for everyone. I'm gonna check, I think I fit in the chat. Okay. So George, would you like to explain to us what did you just share with us?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just backing what Valerie put in the chat. The idea of calling in rather than calling out. And Professor Loretta Ross, founder of the Reproductive Rights Movement, who's doing, Val could talk about this as well, who you can go online, just Loretta Ross, and be part of her teachings about how important it is now in this era of so-called cancel culture, where things have become so polarized, the importance of just when there is that difference and misunderstanding, as opposed to calling people out, the idea of calling them in and bringing them, that we need to bring people together and recognize that, you know, we don't know, we didn't, young people didn't choose to be racist. It's not a choice, right? People have grown up in these divisions, these sharp divisions, and we want to overcome these. There's so much hurt. And anyway, that was it.
Joe, establish and enforce group norms. This is so important, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other. So why is it important to get norms? I had a situation with somebody that said, oh, I said a racist comment. And as you can see, I'm a very outspoken person. And I just mentioned it to that person, saying that was not right. And I'm going to tell you what was the comment. You don't sound Puerto Rican, you sound Mexican. And I'm like, what does that even mean, right? So I call them out. Sometimes people's excuses is like, I didn't meant to say that. It's not the way I said it. Okay, it still impacted me. Even if there was not, like, in the back of the mind of the person was not to hurt me. And we need to be very cautious about those little things. Just because you didn't say it in a mean word doesn't mean that I'm not going to receive it that way. And then don't use this excuse of saying, oh, my bad, it was not my intention, but it hurt. And we need to stop making excuses and saying, it was not my intention, it's not what I meant. I don't care how you meant it, it hurt me. And a lot of our students, sometimes because of the respect that they have for educators, they don't say it. But little things like calling their name wrong, making a comment about their skin color, because we sometimes don't think about it. And these kids are sitting down, when we tell the kids, I don't know Spanish, this is America, you speak English. Hell no. What does that, like, no. These kids are already in a very complicated stage, right? When we come from other countries, we have a very big debate. We cannot be too American, because then we forget that we were Puerto Rican. And then when we're over here, we are too Puerto Rican for a lot of people. So you're constantly like, what the hell? I've been in moments that people say, oh my God, you're so Puerto Rican. Thank you. Like, I don't know what to say after that. Or we're too loud. It is culturally, I just, and our students, when they're together, I don't know if you guys have read the book, Why All Black Kids Sit in the Cafeteria Together. It's because they connect with those people. They speak their language because they connect, because they feel free. And there's another video that you guys can check also. And it's talk about the prejudice that we have, right? When I was growing up, there was no book about single parents, and I was raised by a single mom. There was always book about mom, dad, a house, a dog, and a big fence. And I wanted that. So I never identified with none of the books. None of the books talk about parents being single. So I always felt that I never belonged. And this happens to our kids today. They don't belong because they don't see themselves in books. And I never understood that affect me until now as an adult, that I realized that I never saw nobody like me in the books that I read. And our students are growing up in our classrooms seeing only Chick and Jane and Dr. Seuss, and they're not exposed to something that look like them. That's why it's so important that we ask our unions also to be more interested when they do books. Let's bring books that our students say, oh, look, that girl looks like me, or that boy looks like me, or they talk like me. Like those little things, they're important to our kids. The video actually is called, and it's a TED Talk, and I had it here. I'm sorry, I forgot. I will post it as soon as I remember the name. But little things like that with our kids. Jennifer, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we talked a lot about talking to our kids and asking for their input and learning from them. And I want to be very cautious about how you do that given different age levels, because elementary students or middle, sometimes it's not their job to do that, right? It's not their job to teach you. They're going to school to be educated. I don't know how many times in elementary school I was asked to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. when my family was from Jamaica. I could tell you about Marcus Garvey, but you're supposed to teach me, right? So I want to be careful about that. And another, a great video. It's fairly older, so I don't know how many people have seen it already, but I just saw it for the first time and actually had to turn it off and watch it again another time. Was a video called America to Me. And it is about white educators and high school students of color. And it follows a couple of kids. And I mean, it's literally like, I've seen this exact teacher or this exact educator so many times in my life. The one who's down with everything and thinks they know everything and doesn't need to learn anymore, negates the experience, the lived experience of their colleagues of color, asking students to edit their writing for something else. Like it's a really great video to watch, to really get an understanding of how these nuances are so tiny and you don't realize you're doing them, and the body language that you see in the students. It's a great video. So I encourage everyone to look to see it.
Thank you, Jennifer. And like, this is what I like about these conversations, that where we're talking, is that we can get resource for one each other. We have we normally don't ask for help, which is kind of silly. I think it's just like the human in us is not to ask favors, but we should be sharing these kind of like resource and videos that we learn and books that we research. So I think like that's another thing we can work on, and at the local or at the state level, is creating a place where educators of color can go and post their stories, or can post books, and our white allies can say, look, this helped me to figure it out, certain things like that. It should be a place that we can put all this resource, so we can share with one each other to do the job that is expected from us to do, which is educate others, but educate us in the process. I'm going to Valerie, and then I'm gonna go to continue with the presentation.
I forgot. I have a question. Many of these conversations that we have are dominated by people of color. And you and I, Jennifer and others, and we have a lot of white people in this Zoom, but we're not hearing, in my opinion, we're not hearing from the white people. And it's the white people we need to hear from. We're talking about things that as people of color, we've experienced, we know, we understand, we live it day in and day out. And many white people don't understand and they don't know. And I, as an educator, believe that it's part of my responsibility to educate white people on things that they don't know. And I just want to give you an example. I have an Italian friend who called a Black student ignorant. And in the Black community, ignorant means nigger. So she was brought up before the Racial Disparities Commission at the school. And she called me and she said, Valerie, you know, they're accusing me of racism and they're accusing me of all of this negative treatment towards Black students in a predominantly Black school, and I could lose my job. But she didn't know that the word ignorant was a very harmful word to be used in our community. So I would just ask the white people here who are involved in this beautiful forum, if you would speak up and speak out and speak often, because we need to hear your thoughts and ideas and beliefs so we can better understand how to help you and to support you in your journey through dealing with the race and the racism that exists throughout our educational system. We just need to hear more from the white people. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. So continue with the presentation because we have like 15 minutes left. Oh my God. So when you establish your group norms, ask your students to give you those norms, right? One of my favorite norms, and I use this all the time, is pet me. Please excuse my ignorance. And why do I say pet me? Because sometimes I just sound silly. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound like a very knowledgeable question. And I can say, pet me, please excuse my ignorance, and just do the question, right? And that makes it sounds less like, it's a stupid question, should I ask? When the norms, they also make sure that people understand, don't take things personal, right? But at the same time, be very cautious how you're going to deliver things that can affect somebody. Process is as important as content. You can have the best content in the world about race and racism and how to create it, but if you're not delivering in a way that, or you're not being thoughtful in the way you're giving this information, it can probably just, all that good just don't do anything. So decide up front on the goals of the conversation. What are you are not going to address? So, and you can say, okay, so today we're just going to talk about this thing, not expand it to others. Be very, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this. What are your values and vision? What do you want this conversation to have at the end? Do you want it to continue to have a positive? Do you want just to create connections? Like, be very cautious and have in mind how this process of having these conversations will do. There's a lot of books that you can share with your students too. Even at the elementary level, NEA have a lot of books, right? There's a book about curly hair. We don't even think about, for a lot of people of color, our hair is very important. And we deal with, like, we have to straighten it or we have to use certain products. Other things that I have seen, and I just thought about it. Stop tabbing people's hair. Like, I have seen educators checking their kids' hair like, oh, it's so soft. Oh, it's so like, no, we're not pets. Please do not pet us. Like, and I know that we do it like in a kind, oh, she's so cute. But especially for a person of color, that is like, no, it's a no-no. Another thing, interrupting people of color talking is a big no-no. And I know that I do want to explain why, right? We have not been in the narrative for all the time. It's like the white male speak, right? and everybody, because that's the head. I always told my boyfriend of mine, who's like, you're the head, but I'm the neck. So you don't move if I don't move. But there's a lot of people that like interrupt people of color when talking, right? Or interrupt in general. For us as people of color, it is a no-no. And I'm going to tell you why. We have been silent for so many years that right now that we're using our voice, we want to use it without interruptions. And sometimes we do that with our students in general. We interrupt them. We don't let them finish the conversation, either because it's make us uncomfortable or because it's changing the ambient of the classroom. But these kids need those spaces to have those conversations. If you feel that that's not the appropriate time, you can go and say, you know what? I like where you were going. I'm very interested in having this conversation. Let's have this conversation one-to-one in another time, right? But make sure that you create that time for that students to have those conversations. Remember the name calling. Be very, very careful with that. When talking to parents, oh, thank you, Caroline. Talking to parents, be cautious that there's sometimes a language barrier, but there's also like, be very, when I have conversations with families, African families, I always look for a male figure to come with me because of how they feel, right? We need to be thoughtful about little things like that. The African culture, the man is the male, and you as an educator can go and tell that the kids are doing something wrong. You have to be very cautious how you're expressing it. And that is in the process we are educating ourselves in how to express certain things that we don't know. Let me finish because we're almost done. Model your values and vision. If you have a vision, you say, my vision for this, or I leave for this workshop, was to have open conversation, to see where people are in their locals and doing in their classroom, to share those knowledges. That was my vision for this workshop. Who can help us to create these spaces? Local leaders and other community groups. There's a lot of community groups where we work that are talking about race, that are doing the job. And what better than to get together with our communities and have these conversations, because those are the kids that are going to our school district, and those are the kids that will graduate and continue the work that we have started. Educators of color, we need more educators of color so we can have these conversations. So encourage either your locals, school districts to understand that like in my school, there's a 67% of kids of color, and we don't have even half of educators of color. We need those. We need our kids to be represented in education so they can see that they can get to that point in their life. Talk to your students and their parents. They have so many knowledge and they have so many stories that they are looking to share with us, but we just need to create that space and allowing them to feel that we are by their side. Other things that we can do, encourage them their poetry. Like poetry can help us to put our happiness, but our pain and frustration in a page. Music, have this real conversation. Art, there's a lot of people that can express themselves through art, and give those tools to our students to do so. That is my part. It's 10:36. I know you guys need to go to the other one, but before I leave, I would like for you guys to go into the link, and there's also a feedback or survey that I would like for you guys to take the time to do it. I will appreciate everything because I really want to learn more. I really want to grow. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I will share with you guys my PowerPoint if that helps. I'm gonna copy here and paste it. So I'm sharing with you guys the link to the PowerPoint. And thank you. I really appreciate you guys choosing my workshop. I know there's a lot of good ones over there. So thank you so much. And I encourage you guys to also create your own professional development. Talk about it. Share your stories. Yay, thank you guys. I see a lot of love. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. You guys have an enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone. Have a great one.